You know that feeling when you feel like you're practically begging for connection in your own relationship? It's a tough place to be. Today we're going to dive into the deep psychological toll this takes, why that feeling of having to plead for intimacy is just so incredibly damaging.
Wow, this quote, it really hits hard, doesn't it? Because it points to this really deep, often hidden pain. And let's get one thing straight right away. Wanting intimacy is completely 100% human. There's nothing wrong with that. The destructive part, that's not the need. It's the soul-crushing dynamic of having to beg for it.
All right, so to really get our heads around this, we're going to walk through 5 key parts. We'll start with the pain of pleading itself, then look at the damage it does to your self-worth. We'll also unpack the psychological patterns that keep people stuck in this cycle, and then we'll talk about how to start rebuilding from the inside out. Okay, so let's jump right in with that core feeling. I mean, how does something so natural, so human like wanting connection, how does it start to hurt so much? Well, it happens when that desire stops being a shared thing and turns into this constant one-sided chase. Just look at the stark difference on this slide. On one hand, you have a mutual connection, right? Intimacy makes you feel valued, secure, desired. But when you're stuck in that one-sided pleading dynamic, those feelings get completely flipped. You start to feel like you're a burden, unworthy, and maybe worst of all, just tolerated. And the result of all that? It's just pure emotional exhaustion. This thing that's supposed to be a source of comfort and joy completely transforms into a source of stress. It is absolutely draining. A relationship that's meant to be your safe harbor suddenly feels more like a constant battle.
And that exhaustion, it leads us right into our next big topic, the damage this does to your fundamental sense of who you are. Because see, when your attempts to connect are ignored or rejected over and over again, it's not just that single moment that stings. It's your very core, your identity, that starts to chip away.
So, let's talk about self-worth. What is it really? It's that deep down belief that you are valuable and worthy of love just as you are. In a relationship, that's supposed to be a place where that feeling gets reinforced, right? But when you're constantly pleading, every single act of rejection, or even just indifference, sends the exact opposite message. It screams, your needs don't matter, and you aren't worthy. And that internal damage, it's brutal. It just chips away at your confidence. You start to actually believe, deep down, that you're unlovable, or that your needs are just too much for anyone to handle. You get so worn out, so exhausted, that you might even start hiding your own needs, just to keep the peace and avoid feeling that sting of rejection again.
You know, when you boil it all down, it comes back to this fundamental human truth. We all want to feel desired. We don't want to just be tolerated. That feeling that your presence actually brings joy to your partner, that's vital. Being tolerated is like a quiet, slow-burning rejection that just eats away at your dignity over time.
Okay, so why does this happen? What's the engine that keeps this painful cycle running? Well, a lot of the time, we can understand it by looking at something called attachment theory, specifically a dynamic that's famously known as the anxious avoidant dance.
To put it really simply, attachment theory is all about explaining the patterns of how we act in relationships. So you've got one key style, the anxious style, where a person seeks closeness and reassurance. Then you have the avoidance style, where a person tends to value independence and creates distance, especially when they feel pressured.
And when you put these two styles together, you can get this really devastating feedback loop. Here's how it works. The anxious partner feels a need for reassurance, so they move closer. The avoidant partner feels that as pressure, so they pull away. That withdrawal, of course, makes the anxious partner feel even more anxious, so they pursue even harder, which only makes the avoidant partner pull back even further. You see the cycle. It's this classic frustrating trap where both people are just trying to protect themselves, but they end up making things so much worse for each other.
Now, let's add another layer to this, because for men, this experience can be even tougher. There are all these societal expectations around masculinity that can make an already painful situation feel way more isolating and damaging.
Think about the unwritten rules of traditional masculinity, right? Be strong, be self-sufficient, don't show your emotions, hide any vulnerability. But here's the thing, asking for intimacy, for closeness, that requires vulnerability. It's a direct clash with every single one of those rules.
And the result is just devastating. Instead of seeing the situation for what it is, a relationship problem, an imbalance, it gets internalized as a personal failure. The voice in your head starts saying, I'm not man enough or I'm not good enough, and you completely miss the real issue, which is often just that the partner's needs and styles aren't lining up. Okay,
We've spent a lot of time unpacking the problem. So where do we go from here? Let's talk about the solution. How do you actually break this cycle and start to heal? Well, the path forward isn't about trying to change someone else. It's about reclaiming your own self-respect from the inside out.
And the very first, most important step is actually a mental shift. You have to reframe this entire thing. Expressing your emotional needs is not a weakness. Let me say that again. It is not weakness. It is courage, it's self-awareness, it is a sign of incredible emotional strength, not some kind of personal failure.
So what does this path to healing actually look like? Well, first, it's about rebuilding your self-respect on your own terms, not based on anyone else's approval. Then, it's about setting clear boundaries around what you need. A huge part of it is truly, deeply understanding that someone else's rejection doesn't define your value. And finally, it's about seeking out relationships in the future that are based on mutuality, on a real two-way street.
Because this is the goal. This is what a genuine, healthy connection really is. It's not a negotiation, it's not a chase. It's when two people willingly and happily invest in each other's emotional well-being. It's when affection and closeness are shared freely, just because you both value the connection you have.
So I want to leave you with one final question to think about. Is your connection a shared experience, or is it a constant negotiation? Really taking an honest look at that answer, well, that might just be the most important first step you can take toward finding your peace.
Thanks for joining me for this one.